Thank you very much for inviting me to, to come and say a few words. The events of Easter Sunday were heinous, and we also had some breakdown of law and order in a very small part of the country, which was not helpful. Interestingly, when one talks to investors, they find that more disturbing. Bombings go on all around the world, and it's terrible, has terrible consequences for the lives of many people, but they have an idea of how to cope with that. But when they see a breakdown in law and order in a country, that disturbs them a great deal. But what's been very encouraging is that, and here I think great credit has to go to our security services, they've got on top of the situation very quickly. It has helped that the heinous attacks on Easter Sunday were perpetrated by a very small group of people who didn't have the support of their wider community. And a lot of information came out, particularly from the community itself. And so the security forces, it seems, have been able to really contain the situation very effectively. We've had nothing since then. And even the riots that took place, what was encouraging was that there was widespread condemnation right across our society. And that, I think, was also helpful in making it very clear that this was not something Sri Lanka wanted. And again, it's good that we've not had anything like that since. So the security stuff is way above my pay grade, but as a citizen of this country, I'm pretty encouraged that things have been stable for several weeks now, and a great deal of normalcy has returned, particularly after, I think, the Vesak weekend. That was probably the landmark after which I think people felt more safe, more secure to go about their business and lives. So I think we've got to a better place, and we need to build on that. But I think Asanka really asked me here to tell you a little bit about the economy. And the key message that I would like to deliver is that certainly these events have had a significant negative impact on the economy in a number of ways. But the underlying message that I would want to convey is that the situation is eminently manageable. And I will try to convince you by setting out some facts, which I hope will convince you that the underlying fundamentals of the economy are in pretty good shape. We were fortunate that we went into the April events when these fundamentals were actually in fairly good shape. That has enabled us to absorb some of the negative effects without too much disruption. So why do I say that the underlying fundamentals are in good shape? The first point to make is that on the 13th of May, the Executive Board of the IMF approved the fifth review of the facility that we have with them, the Extended Fund Facility. Now, the IMF Executive Board would not have approved the review if the fundamentals were not in reasonable shape. So the fact that that review went through, I think, is a clear indication that we are in a reasonable place as far as the macroeconomic fundamentals of the economy are concerned. And let me now run through some of the indicators to try to convince you why I say that we are in a reasonable place. First is, even after these events, the financial markets, the impact on the financial markets have been pretty well contained. We've had 6 treasury bill auctions since the 21st of April. On each occasion, the yields actually came down. And we had the largest ever treasury bond auction Sri Lanka has ever had, of 120 billion rupees, about 4-5 weeks ago. Again, the yields came down. Our international sovereign bonds. I just looked at it a little while before I came. We issued a 5-year international sovereign bond, a 5-year tranche, I should say, in March of this year. It is trading about 35, 40 basis points below the issuance price. Our 10-year bond is actually trading about 60 basis points below our issuance price. So the markets are basically telling us they're still open for us. We can go and raise more money. That's in terms of the financial markets are concerned. If you look at inflation, it's about 5%. The headline inflation is about 5%. Our target range is 4 to 6%. And we are very much in the middle of it. There could be some upticks in inflation as we go forward when some administered prices are adjusted. There could be some supply shortages which could push inflation up. But all our models are telling us that during the course of this year, we will remain within that 4 to 6% range. And one good thing is, I suspect next time around the petrol price will come down because global oil prices have actually come down quite a lot. So that's for a tailwind when we need one. In fact, a former colleague of mine who ran the economy for many years, Dr. Jayachandra, said there are 2 things you need for things to work well. One is you need rain, and 2, you need a low oil price. So the oil prices come down, we need a little bit more rain. If that comes, then we're well away. So inflation is well within the target. If you look at the external sector, the Sri Lankan rupee, which depreciated by 16% last year due to a mix of domestic and exogenous factors, has actually appreciated by 3.4% year to date. So that's, again, the rupee has been fairly stable. It shook a bit in the days after the events in April, but it's now pretty stable. And the trade deficit, which was the source of pressure last year, if you take the first 4 months of this year, the deficit for the first 4 months of last year was $4 billion US. This year, it's 2.5 billion. So there has been a significant adjustment in our trade deficit. And that, I think, will help us to absorb the loss in tourism that is going to hit us for sure this year. And that, on balance, we'll see the trade deficit come down, but the services account will obviously be affected by the hit to tourism. On balance, though, we see that our reserves, which are about 6.7 billion US dollars, we were projecting that by the end of the year it will go up to 8.2 billion. But we still think, despite the loss in tourism, despite FDI coming in lower than it's likely to have done otherwise, even allowing for some outflows of foreign institutional investment in our rupee securities market, allowing for all that, we still should see a level of reserves which is pretty much what we have now, even in the worst case scenario. So that's not a great level of reserves, but it's certainly enough for us to manage. The Achilles heel, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, is our external debt burden. That's what worries everybody. Whether we're going to have a Greece-style meltdown because we're not able to meet our external debt. On that, again, there is a positive narrative. We have already paid 65% of our obligations for this year. And fortuitously, there is a bit of leeway because this year, the external debt payments were front-loaded, so as I said, we paid 65%. Next year, the external debt payments are back-loaded. The next international sovereign bond maturity is in October of next year. So we have about 12 months where there is a little bit of leeway. We still have some money to be paid out. But the big payments we've got them behind us for this year, and they are further down the line in the second half of next year, which gives us a bit of breathing space to manage things. And we plan to raise money in the upcoming months, which we feel will, as I said, it's a manageable situation. That's the toughest thing. Now, where the story is not as encouraging is growth. Growth has been low. Last year was only 3.2%. Central Bank thinks the potential growth rate is 5%, so well below potential growth rate. Very encouraging that yesterday the Department of Census and Statistics said that growth was 3.7%. It was 1.8% in the fourth quarter of 2018 when we had those political disturbances. It has bounced back to 3.7%. The central bank projected 4% growth for this year before the April events. And I think with the 3.7% growth in the first quarter, we would have definitely hit the 4%. Because there was only 1.8% growth, as I said, in the fourth quarter of last year, which means that the base effects for the fourth quarter of this year are very favorable. And with that, and with 3.7% growth in the first quarter, we had a very good chance of hitting 4% this year. That's not going to happen. We think now growth is more likely to be closer to 3% than 4%. But still, it's not contraction. It's not negative growth. There will be 3% growth also this year. So, but where we've, again, as I said, I should really mention the tourism sector has had a big, big hit. But again, there is a little bit of an upside narrative in the sense that, as you know, the peak season is from November, December to March. So we were able to bank the money for the first quarter of this year. The first quarter of this year, there was a 4.5% increase in tourism earnings. So that money was in the bank before we had these events. And then, as you all know, this is really the off-season. So that has again given us a little bit of a cushion, a leeway, to try to get our act together, to get things organized before the next peak season towards the end of this year. There is going to be a major hit. Central Bank projected $5 billion worth of receipts from the tourism sector. We've now downgraded it to $3.7 billion. So a significant reduction. But again, I think there's a three-pronged strategy to deal with it. One is security, and there, as I said, significant progress has been made. Two is a financial package to support the tourism sector. Of course, I think all of us are like Oliver Twist. If there's financial support needed, we want more. But there is a package out there, and we'll keep reviewing it to see whether we need to do more to support the tourism sector. And the third thing is promotion, which I think they're about to start now that the security situation is secure, and the travel advisories have been softened. All the major markets, the advisory has at least been softened, and in a couple of our key markets, I think both India and China, they've removed the travel advisories, right? So they've actually removed the travel advisories. So again, hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel. We have a great product, and if we make sure that nothing happens again, we should be able to bounce back. So the bottom line is, this has been a big hit, but as we heard in the introductory remarks, this is a very resilient country, resilient economy, resilient people. We've come through very tough times, probably even tougher times over a prolonged period. This has been a major hit. It's been affected the lives of a number of people very adversely. And there are still some effects which we need to make sure we put behind us, that we need to cope with and put behind us. We have to make sure that the moderate people are not pushed into the arms of the extremists. So there are still some challenges to be met. But I think we've made significant progress from those dark days in April. And there is stability. It's now in our heads, really. The big challenge is in our heads. We have to get the sentiment right. We have to get our confidence up. We have to have confidence in our country, which has come through very tough times and has been extraordinarily resilient. We have to have confidence in our fellow Sri Lankans, who have again shown, as I said, a great deal of resilience. And we need to really, I think Asanka wants us to spend. That's true. We need to go out there, lead normal lives, do what we have always done, and make sure that the country gets through this difficult period as quickly as possible. As I said, the fundamentals are okay, we can manage the situation. It's now up to us to make things work. Thank you very much.
Knowledge Box, the value-based media network.